All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. Shattering Illusions, a red pill guide to reality, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Shattering Illusions, a field guide for men who still notice reality. Dad's checkbook, mom's leave, and the dude in the dress. The true cost of feminism's war on fathers. You are living in a ruin of lies, a once glorious cathedral of Western reason, now defaced by the graffiti of cultural Marxism and the hysterical shrieking of toxic femininity. You have been told that biology is a construct, that your provision is oppression, and that your presence in the family home is optional at best, dangerous at worst. It is time to smash these idols. Consider the ontological assault on sex, a syllogism for the ages. Premise 1. Natural law dictates that biological sexual dimorphism is the structural engine of mammalian reproduction. Premise 2. Human beings are mammals. Conclusion. Therefore, gender fluidity is a logical impossibility, a psychotic break from reality as fundamental as claiming gravity is a social contract. Yet, the wicked liars of the left have weaponized empathy to force you to participate in their delusion, transmogrifying the transcendent truth of male and female into a Nietzschean nightmare where words lose all meaning. We are watching the pharmaceutical mutilation of a generation, a medical malpractice driven by an ideology that hates the telos of the human form, and it is your duty to reject this degeneracy with the sword of dialectic. Look closer to home, where the war for your soul is fought over the ledger of your bank account. You have been hoodwinked into believing that your value is determined solely by your utility to a gynocentric system that views you as a disposable ATM. The modern slut-walk culture, empowered by the state, screams for your resources while offering nothing but contempt in return. You must re-entrain the stoic virtue of prudence. The man who spends his seed and his silver on the momentary pleasure of validation is a grasshopper in winter, destined for the grave. True masculinity is the provident male archetype, the master of the household economy, the builder of civilizations, the man who understands that money is congealed time and life force. To squander it, to impress a demographic biologically wired for hypergamy, that is, to trade your limited existence for the fleeting attention of a creature programmed to seek the highest branch, is the height of irrationality. You are not a resource to be extracted. You are the architect of your own fate. Finally, witness the greatest betrayal of all, the theft of your fatherhood. The state, in its infinite corruption, has deemed the mother the sole arbiter of the child's existence, granting her months of paid leave to bond while you are shuffled back to the salt mines within weeks, if not days. This is not an accident. It is the design of the matriarchal collective. The data screams into the void. Children without fathers are statistically more likely to fail, to fall into crime, to succumb to the very pathologies the left claims to fight, yet they push you out. They enforce a maternal bias that violates the natural law of biparental care. You are taxed to fund the very system that alienates you from your offspring, a cuckoldry not just of the flesh, but of the spirit. It is time to rip the veil off this conspiracy. I offer you no comfort, only the brutal, liberating scalpel of truth. Read on if you have the stomach to reclaim the birthright of Western man from the jaws of the lie, the ontological assault on sex. Truth, as the Apostle John noted, is the liberator, yet we find ourselves shackled in a dungeon of synthetic delusions, staring at the grotesque spectacle of biological males thrashing women in athletic arenas. Consider the irrefutable data from the world of track and field. A biological male, even one suppressed in testosterone, retains the hip structure, lung capacity, and muscle density of a man. When a male sprinter hurdles a female competitor, we are not witnessing progress. We are watching the ceremonial destruction of the telos of the female form. It is a cosmic joke that a civilization built on the protection of the weak now cheers as the predator consumes the prey. This is the sports paradox, where the lie of gender fluidity collides with the brick wall of physical reality, leaving broken female records and weeping women in its wake. We must distinguish the medical reality of dysmorphia from the ideological construct of dysphoria, a distinction the grievance industry prefers to blur. Body dysmorphia is a recognized psychological condition where one obsesses over a perceived flaw. The compassionate, Hippocratic response is therapy, not the surgeon's scalpel. Yet in our malpractice of madness, we treat the delusion as the sovereign truth and the body as the liar. It is a violation of the natural law to amputate healthy organs to appease a disordered mind. If a man believes he is Napoleon, we do not buy him a beer-corn hat and invade Russia. We treat his mind. To affirm the delusion is to participate in the patient's self-destruction, a violation of the oath to do no harm. Consider the linguistic weaponization of the word gender, a term hijacked from the dry shelves of grammar and reforged into a batter ram against biology. Etymologically, gender derives from the Latin genus meaning kind or sort, strictly a linguistic classification for nouns, masculine, feminine, neuter. It was never intended to replace sex, which comes from seker, to divide, signifying the binary cleavage of biological reality. The Marxist strategists of the Cultural Revolution knew they could not defeat biology directly, so they performed a semantic bait and switch, conflating the grammar of the mind with the reality of the flesh. This is a classic Sorite's paradox, a heap of sand mistaken for a mountain. The left posits a spectrum of gender, but formal logic exposes this as ontological incoherence. A spectrum requires two fixed extremes to have any meaning. Without the binary of male and female, the spectrum collapses into a void. If everyone is non-binary, then no one is. This is the performative contradiction at the heart of the gender cult. They deny the binary while simultaneously relying on it to define their transition. You cannot cross a line you claim does not exist. It is a logical non sequitur, a house of cards built on the wind of emotional validation. We have abandoned the medical ethics of the ages for the affirmation model, a descent into therapeutic malpractice. History will look back on the Dutch protocol and the mass sterilization of confused youth with the same horror we reserve for lobotomies. The Western medical tradition, grounded in the tabula rasa of observation and the pursuit of the good, has been replaced by a cargo cult of hormones and surgeries. We are treating a metaphysical wound with plastic surgery, sowing seeds of lifelong endocrine chaos. This rot stems from a philosophical error centuries in the making, a Cartesian dualism that separated the res cogitans, thinking thing, from the res extensa, extended thing. The postmodern goblins have taken this cleavage and weaponized it, creating a ghost in the machine that can override the biological hardware. It is Gnosticism reborn, a hatred of the flesh and a worship of the spark of identity, denying that the soul is the form of the body. By rejecting teleological biology, the idea that things have an inherent purpose, we have invited chaos. Aristotle knew that the acorn has the potential to become an oak, not a toaster. The telos of the male is distinct from the telos of the female, designed for the propagation of the species. To deny this is to deny the architecture of nature itself, leading to a culture of sterility and confusion. We require a therapeutic restoration that aligns the mind with the body, not the body with the mind. The remedy is found in the mastery ladder of life, accepting the brute facts of reality, mastering one's impulses, and finding purpose in duty rather than endless internal introspection. We must shatter the illusion that the self is a mutable, fluid construct. The self is forged in the fire of discipline and adherence to the true. Ultimately, sexual dimorphism is the transcendent truth of the natural law, proven by the syllogism of survival. Without the binary, the species dies. The West once celebrated the complementarity of the sexes, the virtues of the masculine and the feminine interlocking to form a complete social whole. We must return to this wisdom, rejecting the unisex blob of the Marxist nightmare, and re-enshrine the beautiful distinction that gave us the greatest civilization in history. We have dismantled the grotesque theater of gender ideology, but the pathology of the left does not end at the bedroom door. It infects the bank vault with equal virulence. Consider the syllogism of the swine. If feelings define reality, then debt is wealth and scarcity is a myth. This is the economic dogma of the cultural Marxist, a magical thinking that insists winter is optional and the ant owes the grasshopper a living. By severing oikonomia from the anchor of natural law, the feminized state seeks to enslave the provident man to the whims of the improvident, and the bill for this delusion is finally coming due. The economic foundations of masculine virtue. The average American household carries over $90,000 in debt. Yet we are told to admire the grasshopper who sings through summer while the ant labors. Aesop spun a fable about prudence, about the masculine virtue of preparing for winter, and modern educators have twisted it into a morality tale about sharing. The original lesson was stark. The grasshopper dies. Nature does not negotiate with improvidence. I watched a neighbor of mine, a competent carpenter, lose his home to a foreclosure because he refinanced to buy a boat and fund his wife's photography business. The business failed within the year. The marriage collapsed 18 months later, and the family court judge looked at his shattered finances and decided he was an irresponsible father. The system rewarded her impulsivity and punished his failure to contain it. This is the economic reality we face. A civilization that subsidizes the grasshopper and taxes the ant into oblivion. Consider the word economy itself. It derives from the Greek oikonomia, meaning household management. This was once the exclusive domain of the paterfamilias, the male head who governed resources, allocated labor, and ensured the survival of his lineage through disciplined planning. Aristotle distinguished the household from the polis, understanding that the microeconomy of the family was the foundation upon which all larger economies rested. Today, the state has inserted itself as the surrogate husband, offering welfare, child support enforcement, and alimony extraction to replace the provident male. The result, a society of permanent children. I have seen men in their 30s living in rented apartments, driving leased vehicles with nothing saved, nothing owned, nothing built. They have been taught that consumption constitutes identity, that buying products equals being a man. This is a lie. A man is defined by what he produces, not what he consumes. The medieval European apprenticeship structure functioned on a basic tenet. Acquiring competence demands time, hardship, and submission to authority. A youth entered a guild as a novice, advanced to a skilled worker, and potentially rose to master status after years of proving his capability. This stood as the primordial path for masculine economic ascent. Compare that with the modern university apparatus, where a young man borrows $15,000 for a gender studies diploma, exiting at age 24 devoid of marketable talents and filled with toxic dogma. The typical borrower spends 20 years repaying that obligation, 2 decades of bondage to financial entities merely for a credential that fits him for nothing beyond joining the parasite class. The guild framework was imperfect, yet it fashioned men capable of raising cathedrals. The university machinery churns out baristas who lecture you on privilege. Stoic philosophy offers a framework for masculine economics that the modern world has desperately tried to forget. Epictetus taught that wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. The consumerist model of masculinity depends on the opposite premise, that a man must constantly acquire to prove his worth. This is economic slavery disguised as freedom. I know men who work 60 hours weekly to support lifestyles their grandfathers would have considered absurd, leased luxury cars that depreciate the moment they leave the lot, oversized homes filled with furniture bought on credit, vacations funded by credit cards at 23% interest. They are not free. They are hamsters on wheels, running faster to stay in the same place, while inflation erodes whatever savings they manage to accumulate. The Stoic approach inverts this: reduce desires, increase competence, accumulate capital, achieve autonomy. The goal is not to consume more, but to need less. Prudence, one of the 4 cardinal virtues identified by Plato and later adopted by Christian theology, encompasses foresight, practical wisdom, and the ability to judge the appropriate course of action. In financial matters, prudence manifests as the capacity to delay gratification, to sacrifice present pleasure for future security. Walter Mischel's famous marshmallow experiments demonstrated that children who could resist immediate rewards showed better life outcomes decades later. This is not coincidence. It is the mathematical reality of compound interest and accumulated advantage. The man who saves and invests in his 20s has options in his 40s that the spender will never possess. The divorce industry understands this implicitly. It targets men at the peak of their earning capacity after decades of accumulation to extract the maximum possible transfer of wealth. A prudent man structures his affairs to minimize this exposure. He understands that the legal system is not neutral, that family courts operate as wealth transfer mechanisms, and that economic independence requires defensive positioning. The provident male archetype appears throughout Western literature and history, from Odysseus returning to reclaim his household to the biblical Joseph storing grain against famine. These figures embodied a simple truth: masculine virtue includes the obligation to provide for and protect those under your care. This obligation has been weaponized against men by a legal system that enforces provision while denying protection. Consider that men comprise approximately 80% of suicides, yet suicide prevention resources focus predominantly on female mental health. Consider that men receive 63% longer sentences than women for the same crimes. Consider that fathers are granted primary custody in less than 20% of contested divorce cases. The contract has been broken. The provident male is expected to provide endlessly while receiving nothing in return. No respect, no gratitude, no legal protection, no social support. The only rational response is to withdraw from a system designed to exploit masculine virtue while criminalizing masculine self-defense. Inflation is not an accident. It is a policy choice that transfers wealth from savers to debtors, from the prudent to the improvident, from the future-oriented to the present-obsessed. When central banks print money, they are effectively taxing everyone who holds currency, everyone who saved, everyone who deferred consumption. The current monetary system punishes exactly the behavior that built Western civilization: thrift, accumulation, long-term planning. A man who saved $1,000 in 1970 would need over $70,000 today to purchase the same goods. Where did that value go? It was stolen through inflation, transferred to those who borrowed and spent, to the government that printed, to the financial sector that profited from the Cantillon effect. Understanding this is essential to masculine economic defense. Hard assets, productive skills, and communities of trust become the only reliable stores of value in a system designed to extract from the responsible. The classical Republican tradition, from Cicero to the American founders, understood that political freedom required economic independence. A man dependent on others for his livelihood cannot speak freely, act freely, or think freely. This is why the founders restricted voting to property owners. They understood that only those with economic stake in the outcome could be trusted with political power. Universal suffrage has produced exactly the outcome they feared: a political class that buys votes with promises of redistribution, funded by the productivity of men who have no say in how their resources are allocated. The welfare state is fundamentally a wealth transfer from men to women, from the productive to the reproductive, from the future to the present. Women receive approximately 80% of welfare benefits while paying approximately 30% of income taxes. This is not compassion. It is gynocentrism enforced through government violence. That evolutionary conflict has a name, and the Western canon once understood it with crystalline clarity: paternal investment. The term itself, the careful allocation of resources to ensure one's genetic legacy, has been scrubbed from polite discourse, replaced by the infantilizing language of child support and co-parenting that deliberately obscures who is actually investing and who is extracting. The Latinate pater denotes not mere biological contribution, but the foundation of authority, responsibility, and lineage, the very bedrock upon which civilization constructs itself across generations. When a man invests in his offspring, he commits the most profound economic act in nature, the transfer of his accumulated life force into the future. But this transaction requires certainty, and certainty is precisely what the modern gynocentric order has systematically destroyed, while demanding the investment continue unabated. The evolutionary economics of paternal investment: a man who has been cheated, robbed, or betrayed by a woman will recover. A man who has raised another man's child under the illusion of paternity has been biologically annihilated. I remember standing in a family court hallway, watching a man clutching a DNA test like a death certificate, because for his genetic legacy, it was. The state didn't care. The judge didn't care. His 18 years of paternal investment had been extracted at gunpoint by a gynocentric system that treats men as expendable resource extraction units while systematically concealing the biological reality of paternity uncertainty. This isn't an accident of modern policy. It's the institutionalization of an evolutionary conflict as old as sexual reproduction itself. The ancients understood what modern ideology obliterates. Bride price customs existed across civilizations not because men owned women, but because intelligent cultures recognized the fundamental asymmetry of reproductive investment. Among the Lobediu of southern Africa, the Nuer of Sudan, the ancient Hebrews, the Germanic tribes, the exchange of cattle, land, or labor for a bride wasn't commerce in human flesh. It was an explicit acknowledgement that male resources are the currency of reproduction, and that a man transferring his accumulated wealth to a woman's kin represents a profound biological gamble requiring reciprocal guarantees. The Latin sponsalia, betrothal, derives from sponder, to promise solemnly. The promise was exclusive access to female reproductive capacity in exchange for male provisioning. Modern anthropology, captured by feminist framing, rebrands this sophisticated contract as oppression while studiously ignoring its evolutionary logic. Evaluate asymmetrical biological costs via game theory principles. Human females hold roughly 400 mature eggs, involving a 9-month pregnancy plus extended nursing and caretaking duties. Human males manufacture 100 million sperm daily. Robert Triver's parental investment theory, sadly missing from compromised academic institutions, proves that the lesser investing sex vies for access to the greater investing sex, which remains selective regarding partners. This dynamic constitutes evolutionary strategy with the certainty of compounding math, not social tyranny. Female biology prioritizes excellence, obtaining superior genes and provision for restricted reproductive windows. Male biology prioritizes volume, maximizing conceptions across various mates. Such opposing tactics produce an enduring conflict that political measures cannot erase. The distinction between genetic and social fatherhood represents perhaps the most deliberately obscured truth in modern discourse. Every traditional civilization developed mechanisms to align these two categories because their decoupling destroys male incentive to invest. The Jewish ketubah, the Roman patria potestas, the English common law presumption of legitimacy within marriage all institutionalized the recognition that men will not voluntarily provision children who do not carry their genes. This isn't pettiness or insecurity, it's the evolutionary mathematics of inclusive fitness. A man raising another man's offspring is, from the cold perspective of natural selection, a genetic cuckold whose resources benefit a competitor's lineage. The word itself, cuckold, derives from the cuckoo bird, which deposits its eggs in other birds' nests to be raised at their expense. Nature invented parasitism, humans merely gave it a name. Male psychology evolved specific defensive mechanisms against paternal uncertainty with the same precision that the immune system evolved to detect pathogens. Jealousy isn't a character flaw, it's a cognitive security system honed over millennia. The tactical deployment of mate-guarding behaviors, the visceral rage response to suspected infidelity, the intense focus on sexual exclusivity, these aren't social constructs imposed by patriarchal conditioning. They're as natural as hunger and as necessary as fear. Studies consistently demonstrate that men experience greater distress over sexual infidelity than emotional infidelity, while women show the reverse pattern, a sex difference that emerges cross-culturally with remarkable consistency. This isn't accident, it's the evolutionary signature of paternal uncertainty pressure. The modern therapeutic industry, captured by feminist ideology, pathologizes these natural defenses as insecure attachment or toxic masculinity, diagnosing the immune response while ignoring the infection. Female hypergamy, the tendency to marry up in resource acquisition, represents an equally rational evolutionary strategy that feminine primary messaging has recast as romantic preference. Across cultures and throughout history, women demonstrate consistent preferences for male traits signaling resource acquisition capacity, status, wealth, ambition, intelligence, willingness to invest. The dove-gray mourning attire of Victorian widows lasted precisely as long as it took to secure a new provider. Contemporary studies of online dating behavior reveal that women rate 80% of men as below average in attractiveness, a statistical impossibility that exposes the hypergamous filter operating on potential mates. This isn't venality or superficiality, it's the rational deployment of limited reproductive capital toward optimal returns. The problem emerges when civilization pretends this dynamic doesn't exist, leaving men bewildered by repeated rejection that follows predictable but unacknowledged patterns. Family court represents the institutional triumph of gynocentrism over natural law, systematically removing male control over resource investment while maintaining financial extraction through state violence. The statistics read like a war crimes tribunal report. Mothers receive primary custody in approximately 80% of contested cases. Child support enforcement operates with an efficiency that would make the Stasi envious. Wage garnishment, license suspension, imprisonment for arrears. Yet when paternity fraud is discovered, the system invariably responds that the best interests of the child trump genetic truth. A man discovers his 15-year-old son carries another man's DNA, and the court orders continued payments under threat of incarceration. This isn't justice. It's institutionalized theft with a veneer of legal process. The ancien regime at least had the honesty to call tribute by its name. The paternal certainty principle operates through formal logic with the inexorability of a geometric proof. Syllogism the first, men who invest in genetically unrelated offspring reduce their inclusive fitness. Syllogism the second, natural selection eliminates traits that reduce inclusive fitness. Conclusion, male psychology will evolve mechanisms ensuring paternal certainty before significant resource investment. Yet contemporary social policy operates on the demonstrably false premise that men should simply trust against evolutionary evidence and statistical reality that their partner's offspring are their own. The paternity fraud statistics, ranging from 1 to 30%, depending on population studied, with hospital-based studies suggesting 3 to 5% as a conservative estimate, indicate that non-paternity events occur at rates that would constitute an epidemic if recognized as the biological catastrophe they represent. 1 in 20 men raising children under the assumption of paternity is unknowingly raising another man's genetic legacy. This isn't a social problem amenable to sensitivity training. It's a biological crisis demanding institutional recognition. Male provisioning psychology differs fundamentally from female resource acquisition in ways that transform entire civilizations. The male brain releases dopamine in response to resource acquisition and transfer to mates and offspring, a neurochemical reward system that built the provisioned family unit as the fundamental cell of social organization. The cathedral at Chartres, the Oxford colleges, The transcontinental railroads all ultimately rest on male psychology's willingness to transfer accumulated resources to the next generation under conditions of reasonable certainty about genetic relationship. Destroy that certainty through institutionalized paternity fraud and no-fault divorce extraction, and the provisioning impulse doesn't redirect, it extinguishes. Why build when the fruits of building can be seized and transferred to another man's lineage? Why sacrifice present pleasure for future investment when the future investment vehicle operates as a casino with loaded dice? The restoration of paternal investment requires nothing less than the reclamation of the contract that civilization itself represents. Natural law, the tradition running from Aristotle through Aquinas to the American founding, recognizes that legitimate authority derives from consent, not coercion. The marriage contract, properly understood, exchanged male provisioning for paternal certainty. When the state unilaterally nullifies the certainty provision while enforcing the provisioning requirement through violence, it has dissolved the very basis of the agreement. The remedy isn't bitterness or withdrawal, though both represent rational responses to systematic betrayal. The remedy is the explicit renegotiation of terms based on biological reality rather than ideological fantasy, DNA testing at birth as a universal practice, presumptive joint custody as the default legal position, the elimination of no-fault divorces, asset dissolution mechanics, and the criminalization of paternity fraud as the theft it manifestly is. The Western tradition offers the tools, the dialectic method to expose false premises, the natural law framework to articulate legitimate claims, the constitutional machinery to enshrine protections. What remains is the will to deploy them against the gynocentric capture that has transformed the family from a reciprocal institution into an extraction mechanism. The truth, spoken without apology, remains the only weapon that can shatter illusions. I have watched this paternal investment contract shattered against the rocks of gynocentric predation, and the wreckage reveals something far more sinister than mere bureaucratic incompetence. The state does not simply fail to protect paternal investment. It actively weaponizes the father's biological imperative to provide, transforming his sacrificial labor into a resource extraction mechanism that funds the very matriarchal degeneracy enslaving him. When we strip away the sentimental sophistry of shared parenting and gender equality, we confront an ugly truth. The modern welfare state has positioned itself as the ultimate cuckold, inserting itself between father and child to claim both the man's resources and the child's allegiance, while the biological father is reduced to a mere sperm donor and ATM. This systematic erasure of the paternal role did not arise spontaneously. It emerged from the Marxist feminist conviction that the traditional family represents an oppressive structure that must be dismantled piece by piece. Beginning with the father's removal from the domestic sphere, the paternal presence deficit. Where the father is, there is the fortress, wrote the Roman satirist Juvenal, observing a truth so absolute that only a modern academic could miss it. We look at the smoking ruins of the family unit and are told by the high priests of cultural Marxism that the solution is merely more state intervention, more equity, and the complete erasure of the masculine spirit from the home. Consider the great Scandinavian experiment, that supposed Valhalla of social engineering. Sweden introduced its daddy quota in 1995, a self-righteous bureaucratic mandate forcing fathers to take a month of leave or lose it to the ether of the state. They tightened the screws again in 2002 and 2016, desperately trying to legislate against biology itself. The result? A recent study from the Swedish Institute for Social Research found that while the paperwork shows increased uptake, the reality remains stubbornly biological. Mothers still take the vast majority of the total leave. Why? Because the leftist ideologues ignore the fundamental syllogism. Women possess the biological hardware for nursing and early infant bonding. Early infancy requires said bonding. Therefore, the mother is the primary anchor of early childhood. No amount of state coercion can refute the natural law written in our DNA. Yet the state persists in its demonic effort to sever the child from the mother's breast to appease the gray, genderless god of equality. This is not merely a policy dispute. It is a calculated cultural war on the very concept of the father. Turn on the TV, that glowing altar of mind control, and observe the bumbling idiot trope, the Homer Simpson, the Peter Griffin, the hapless moron who couldn't tie his own shoelaces without his long-suffering, infinitely patient wife saving him. This is the gamma bias of the media landscape, a relentless psychological operation designed to marginalize the paternal influence. If you smash the image of the father as the stoic guide, the protector, the disciplinarian of virtue, you smash the child's ability to internalize the logos, the ordering principle of the universe. By purging the father from the domestic sphere, the state steps in as the surrogate husband, offering security in exchange for dependence, effectively turning the nuclear family into a client of the blob. The economic machinery grinding men into dust is even more insidious. Look closely at the structure of parental leave across the West. It is a trap. By granting mothers months of state-subsidized time while offering fathers a pittance, a mere fortnight in some jurisdictions, the system enforces a massive transfer of wealth and power. The man is herded back into the salt mines of the corporate world, his productivity extracted via taxation to fund the welfare state, while his wife is paid by the government to raise his child. It is financial cuckoldry writ large. The man bears the burden of economic production, yet the state usurps his role as the provider, buying the loyalty of the mother and child with his own confiscated wages. This is the Marxist dream realized, the dismantling of the private patriarchal family and its replacement by the public gynocentric collective. But let us speak the forbidden truth. The father provides something the mother cannot. Scientific evidence on paternal bonding reveals a neurobiological distinctiveness that parenting theory tries to obscure. While the maternal bond is often one of comfort and preservation, a retreat into safety, the paternal bond is one of challenge. When a father tosses his infant into the air, the mother's heart stops. The father's eyes light up. This is not recklessness. This is the essential training for a hostile world. Rough and tumble play, a distinctly masculine style of parenting, teaches the child risk assessment, emotional regulation under pressure, and the boundaries of the physical world. To deny a child this masculine energy is to deny them the sword and shield they will need to carve their path through the chaos of existence. You cannot raise a warrior in a padded room designed by a committee of feminist theorists. The result of this systematic purging is the paternal presence deficit, a plague with a taxonomy of horrors so specific it reads like a medical autopsy of a dying civilization. The data is irrefutable and terrifying in its consistency. Children from fatherless homes are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime. They are 9 times more likely to drop out of school. The Centers for Disease Control's own data indicates that 85% of youth in prison come from fatherless homes. This is not a correlation. It is a causality rooted in the natural law of development. Without the father, the child lacks the external boundary, the representation of the other, the introduction to the societal law. The solution is not more state handouts or positive role models in cartoons. It is the restoration of the patriarch's authority within the home. We must dismantle the feminine bias in leave policies, demand equal time for fathers not to help the mother, but to exercise their distinct role, and reject the feminization of parenting that treats masculinity as a pathology to be cured, rather than the very foundation of a stable soul. The curtain has been torn down, and the wizard of woke stands exposed as a huckster selling spiritual poison. You see now that gender nihilism is not compassion, it is ontological terrorism, a war on the very concept of logos that defines Western man. To accept the lie that sex is a spectrum is to surrender your mind to the void of subjectivism, rendering you incapable of the rational thought required to build a legacy. This denial of nature is inextricably linked to the theft of your resources. The modern feminist state is a colossal engine of wealth transfer, designed to extract the surplus production of prudent men to subsidize the chaotic choices of the masses. They demand you abandon the truth, the good and the beautiful for a nightmare of nebulosity, but you have refused. When a woman tests your financial resolve, she is not being petty. She is conducting a Darwinian audit to see if you possess the stoic backbone to survive the coming winter. You must pass this test not by simping, but by embodying the virtue of prudence, saving, investing, and refusing to set your value alight to keep a frivolous partner warm for a night. But beware the state's trap. The disparity in parental leave is not an accident. It is the genocentric boot stamping on the face of fatherhood, confirming that while the mother is deemed essential, you are legally processed as a mere source of revenue. Cast off this leash. Hoard your capital, sharpen your intellect, and embrace the masculine burden of provision as a shield against the decay. You hold the red pill. The hallucinations of the left have no power over a man who stands firm in the truth of his own biology and the sovereignty of his own mind. The restoration of the West begins the moment you say no to the lie. And now the sponsored book introduction, Shattering Illusions, a red pill guide to reality. Men are not born to apologize. I learned this the hard way. By 30, I'd climbed corporate ladders, dated strong, independent women, and recited every egalitarian mantra society demanded. Yet none of it stopped my layoff, the divorce papers, or the hollow ache of living by rules that erased my purpose. This book exists because I refuse to die a slave to lies. Biology doesn't negotiate. Testosterone primes men to conquer. Yet we're told to sit quietly in open plan offices while antidepressants and dad bods multiply. The CDC. Reports male depression rates have tripled since 1990, coinciding with the rise of desk jobs and the demonization of raw masculinity. Women swipe right on 6'2" CEOs while hashtagging kill all men. Courts seize children from fathers who dare to discipline. Feminists preach equality but date diagonally upward. The data doesn't lie. Norway's gender parity utopia has fewer women in STEM than Algeria. The harder we chase fairness, the faster desire flees. This isn't theory, it's survival. You're here because you feel the dissonance. You lift weights but swallow feelings. You provide but get called toxic. You've seen the 80-20 sexual economy where 5'8" betas rot in loneliness while chads monopolize Tinder. You've watched woke HR departments replace merit with pronouns. You know the stats. Fatherless homes breed 63% of suicides, yet the state incentivizes single motherhood. Your ancestors built empires. Your peers build Minecraft castles. This book is a reckoning. We'll dissect the feminist double bind that shames traditional masculinity while punishing men who abandon it. You'll learn why stoicism, not vulnerability, saves marriages, how hypergamy's 10-year wall forces women to settle, and why soft males get cuckolded by dark triad alphas. We'll expose the logistical fraud of gender equality using evolutionary psychology, NIH studies, and the cold math of sexual economics. You'll master tactics, boosting testosterone through ice baths, forming tribal brotherhoods, and exploiting fertility deadlines in prenups. Non-negotiable warning: if you still believe toxic masculinity is a problem or that house husbands inspire lust, close this book now. Go binge Netflix. Decorate your apartment with plants. This isn't for you. For the rest, the men ready to lead, provide, and outlast civilization's decay. These pages are your arsenal. Dominance isn't optional. It's biology's ultimatum. Wake up or die out. Your choice. Shattering Illusions, a red pill guide to reality, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.